Welcome to Trial Lawyer Prep. What if you could hang out with trial lawyers and jury consultants? Ask them about connecting with clients and juries more effectively. Then take strategies, tactics, and insights to increase your success. Each week, Elizabeth Larrick takes an in-depth look at how to regain touch with the everyday world, understand the emotional burden of your clients and juries, and use focus groups in this process. Elizabeth is an experienced trial lawyer, consultant, and founder of Larrick Law Firm in Austin, Texas. Her goal is to help you connect with juries and clients in order to improve your abilities in the courtroom. Now, here's Elizabeth.
Hello, and welcome to the podcast Trial Lawyer Prep. I'm your host, Elizabeth Larrick, and I'm glad that you're here. This episode, we are going to be talking about the mindset shift that needs to happen for focus groups. And what I'm really talking about and who I'm really talking to is people who are running focus groups, and that's different than mock juries, and people who are interested. Maybe you're going to get started doing a focus group, you're interested in doing virtual. This episode is for you. And we've been doing a lot of episodes lately on virtual focus groups. So if you've just now listening in, welcome, welcome. But also there have been several episodes that I've been doing lately just to kind of talk about virtual, and even as simple as doing a 1 hour virtual focus group. So those are here pretty recently, just dropped in, I believe in March for that 1 hour one. And then also so just talking about with other lawyers here recently about doing virtual focus groups. And I think our last one had virtual plus in person. So this episode is great for you if you're just getting started, or maybe this episode is for you if you've been doing them, but maybe you're just not getting enough information. And so I do a lot of focus groups, been doing them for over 8 years. I've got over 1,000 hours, more than 1,000 hours of a focus group time under my belt. And what I see time and time again are some snafus, some things that maybe are holding us back as lawyers to get as much as we need out of focus groups. So I thought this would be a really good episode to share some thoughts on it, but also I've got a little checklist for you, and we're going to throw that in the show notes as well. But really, why is this important? And that's because how we approach our focus group with our mindset really impacts how we present, what we present, and really how we're moderating, asking questions, trying to get that discussion going. And I see these really small, subtle things that happen because I have focus groups that I lead, but then I also have focus groups that I put together that other lawyers lead, and I am there just as backup. And so these are, things that obviously I've made these mistakes before, but, have been able to watch and correct, and then also have other folks that I help and kind of coach along the way to help them do better focus groups. And I just want to pause right here to say this is different than a mock jury. Okay. If you've been listening to the podcast, looking at some of the things on my website, you would see like my goal is focus groups. Okay. Because that's the way that I have been taught, but also what I've seen really work well is these smaller size focus groups to basically research versus doing an end-all be-all day, 6 hour, one side versus the other side, openings, fake judge, the whole thing. That's a mock jury. And if you want to know more about the differences, I put together an episode. That's episode 101, but also there's a blog on my website as well. So what we're really talking about today, though, is that focus group. And this is virtual or this is in person. So either way, this mindset that we need to kind of shift into as lawyers, right? Or staff. I just don't want to also say that too, because a lot of lawyers that I work with have staff members that either set them up or they're a part of watching or even presenting. And people do that because they know sometimes they're just too passionate. And so having staff help and present is always a great way to do it. If we have great staff, they also get impassioned and emboldened. And so sometimes this can happen for us as well. We have a little bit of a mind shift, and that's kind of where I want to spend time today talking about. Because the key element of a focus group is that, we remain neutral, open, curious, right? We want to know more. And we really want to make sure that we're not exposing our preference or our bias, unless that is the style of the focus group. But even so, thinking about moderating, asking questions, right? This is a really, again, key element. We want to make sure that we are remaining neutral and open to make sure we get everybody's thoughts. because we don't want to immediately influence our group. When we do, right, we're already cueing things one way or the other, and we really don't want to try and influence folks that way if we're trying to remain open and neutral and get more information. And that is a lot of what I use focus groups for, right? We're talking about doing just a neutral set of facts. What do you think? Maybe it's just a concept, right? A stroke. What does that mean to you? Or maybe we're talking about what kind of rules apply in a daycare, right? Who goes to a daycare, right? What age kids? And just to kind of get information. And sometimes people like to practice voir dire, right? And other times we're doing focus groups where we do have a slanted presentation. However, our moderation, right, our questioning should be very neutral, right? So there's still going to be a mindset shift in here, okay? Because our goal is always to find and create the best case for the jury, the folks that make the decision. We can keep in our mindset the whole way, build the case up, thinking about what we think is true, what we think will win. And it could be the complete opposite to the jury members. And then we just miss it. We don't really understand it. And then we lose. And then they tell us in the hallway afterwards. So we want to avoid that. And that's kind of why I've always used, when I run my own practice, I use focus groups for this exact thing. If I saw something that looked like a red flag, right, then I'm like, okay, let me go take it to the focus group to see. Is it really a red flag? Do I need to work more on this? Or is it not as bad, right? Maybe there's some facts in there that alleviate it. But either way, those focus groups were always a huge guideline for me for putting cases together. So let's talk about our lawyer mindset, right? So when we talk about shifting our mindset, I'm talking about our lawyer mindset to a focus group research mindset. So thinking about our lawyer minds and where they're all created, right? Law school. And that really makes a huge influence on our brains, including the language that we use, how we talk about things, and then we move into practice and everyone around us, right? Other lawyers, judges, the court, we're all using the same kind of legalese, talking about things that way. And then we kind of get also in another mindset of thinking about it very differently than regular people, but also thinking about, like myself, and of course, other people who like personal injury work, plaintiff's personal injury work, employment work, criminal law defense, right? Your job is really to win. And you've got a client who depends on you, but also you're running a practice that needs to make money. And there's always a little bit of risk, right? Because we are on a contingency fee. So there's a lot of pressure going on to win, to put together, make the most money, make the client happy. And there's also a lot of confrontation that goes in, really at any level, right? Lawyering confrontation comes in and the kind of cross-exam style. And that's pretty normal to us, right? I mean, people are you get into the courtroom and guess what? You got to stand up and state your side, right? Who you are, what are the claims? What are your, so it's always kind of this confrontational setup when you're walking in to a presentation like that, either a motion or a mediation, or even getting on the phone with opposing counsel. You're constantly confronting, right? Somebody who's on the opposite side, or you're having to basically pit your side out there. When we talk about a focus group or a research mindset, we're really turning that to an non-confrontational, neutral learning, right? Whereas the lawyer mindset is to win, right? Our research, our focus group mindset is just to learn, right? So most researchers, if you go and Google focus group, right? There's tons of stuff out there about setting up focus groups, and they're talking about the research style, right? Marketing style. So you're going to get a lot of information on that. Most of the time, though, it's all the same. Use plain language. Be neutral, right? Use open-ended questions, right? And that's because the whole purpose is to learn. Learn everything there is to learn, right? And then get behind that, figure out what's backing up all those things. So two very different mindsets. And what happens is sometimes if we go into a focus group and we don't really even realize we've got this lawyer mindset going, right? We're going to try and win. Even though we know, I can't reveal my bias, we do really very subtle things. And it could just be things like saying my client or my case. Or a lot of times what I see is people they'll get argumentative, right? If you have a participant who has an opposite point of view to what you want to win the case, they can get a little argumentative. Also kind of confrontational. And this kind of comes in where, in doing a deposition, one of the best questions you can ask a defendant or the corporate rep or you guys is why? Why? Best one word question, right? That is not great for focus groups. And you may be thinking, well, how come? Well, a lot of this has to do with thinking about our size of our groups here. You may like them small. I know lawyers who like 6 people in there. Nothing wrong with that. I know people who want 14 people in there. Nothing wrong with that. However, you now have small group dynamics, even if you are on Zoom. Asking people why, it is a confrontational question, right? It also asks people, our brains actually go to a different side, right? Instead of sticking with our thought, we again go over to kind of getting, oh, whoa, okay, now I've got to actually analyze and give a little different response. So we really want people keep in that train of mind. And a lot of people talk about this. This is not anything new. Asking, well, tell me more about that instead of asking why. The other thing that I see sometimes is people, and again, we do it as lawyers, agree, disagree, right? And the way that it works out in this small group dynamics of a focus group, someone will give an opinion. Oh, the light was green, or oh, it's the purple. And then the follow-up is who disagrees? Now you're pitting them against each other. In a small group, it's very, very difficult. As strangers, it's really hard to get people to do that. Now, we may do that in jury selection where we've got 40 people. Sometimes we even have to manage 60 people or more, right? That's a good way to cull the whole audience, right? People like, somebody in the front rows, disagreeing with the person in the back row, they can't even see each other, right? It's very much more anonymous versus here, it's very different. Confrontation is very different. And what ends up happening is when you kind of start to create this a little more confrontational, it's very hard for people to feel like they can actually give honest opinions. And a lot of times people will start to reduce their participation. Now, this also lets other people who have a big personality to take over the group. Now, at this point, now we're not really getting all the information that we need from these folks. We're kind of now stifling our group. We're stifling to get that information. And here's the thing. These are very subtle things that can happen, but basically it's just a little bit of an unnerving thing in us. It's like, oh, kind of our gut telling us like, this doesn't really feel safe to share anymore. Or if the lawyer reveals their bias, even on accident, like it's still going to end up coloring the group. Some people want to support and go with you, whether they like you or not, or they agree with the position or not, just because you're the one paying them. So a lot of really kind of subtle things that can happen. We're just walking in, being our lawyer minds, right? That's, what we've been trained to do for years. So, but if we flip it around and we think about going into a focus group with our research mindset, our learning mindset, right? We're going to work really hard to be neutral. We're going to set up open-ended questions. We're going to get questions that maybe scaling questions, right? And we're going to set up that agree, disagree differently. Now, a lot of times people say, well, I like that question. Let me, very subtle, but very different. It's easy for the moderator to say, who agrees with this statement? Meaning, or who disagrees with this statement? Then I give a statement. Uber driver was distracted and therefore is responsible. Who agrees with that? Who disagrees with that? I'm the one who's standing in the center asking questions, but I'm asking both sides. And I'm not trying to pit each other against one another. Maybe I'm pitting them against me, and that's okay as the moderator. But again, I'm keeping it neutral. Like, do you agree or disagree? Right? Versus saying, okay, Susie, you said purple, Johnny, you said brown. Who's right? Okay, now we're just kind of like, who disagrees? Who agrees? You're rarely going to get a lot of participation out of those style of questions, which is another reason not to use them. But there's other ways to ask questions, again, to keep it open, keep it neutral, but still gauge people's, is it yes or no? That's also thinking it's always black and white, right? That's why I love a scaling question, to give people options and then be able to ask them about their scale. Going back to our research mindset here, where instead of asking why, we're going to say, tell me more. And what you're going to find is you're going to have a much more open discussion. You're going to hear people disagree with one another in a very polite way, but they're going to do it, right? Even though it's a small group dynamic, but also what you're really going to be able to get is people are going to feel safe giving you that deeper explanation, right? Whatever maybe it's an inner bias. they're going to feel safe enough to give, when you do that follow-up, to give you more than that initial first blush yes or no. I'm a 6 out of 10. And they won't do that if they feel like it's confrontational or argumentative or, like, oh, this doesn't feel safe. But having that open, oh, yes, of course. Tell me, being neutral. Yes, tell me this. Okay, go ahead. Thanking everybody, right? And I know that's a whole thing about moderating that we could talk about for a whole nother session. But I always just tell people, if you're new to moderating, like, just the key is open-ended questions, asking everyone the open-ended question, right? And then not following up. I think that's probably one of the other things too that happens when we think about a very different between a lawyer mindset and a focus group researcher mindset is kind of sometimes the follow-up. We have a tendency to, oh yeah, oh, I agree with that too, right? Oh, now you've just imputed your bias, right? Versus somebody else in the group who maybe hasn't given their opinion yet and they know, oh, now I'm disagreeing with you. Okay, maybe I'll just agree just to go along to get along, right? Get over with this focus group. Versus a very open, neutral researcher mindset would just say, okay, and next, and next, and next, because your job is to direct traffic, right? You're just making sure everybody's getting their opinions in there. You're getting hearing from everybody, right? You're not actually, right, trying to tell people where to go, right? And that's kind of the difference between like, oh, no, we're not going to listen to that anymore. We're going to go over here. But I'm going to say thank you so much for that. And then I'm not going to say thank you over here, right? So that also cues people in. Very subtle, small things that can happen. So obviously the encouragement from this episode is to shift your mindset when you are moving into doing a focus group. Be very aware. That's half the battle sometimes. It's just looking at what we're going to do and being aware of, oh, that actually is showing my bias. That's showing my preference if I say it that way. And if you do, right, the whole goal of focus groups is to get new information, get out of your point of view, find other points of view that you can't get on your own. Go try and ask another lawyer. Guess what? They got the same mindset as you, right? Oh, well, I'll just go ask my family. No, wrong. They're just as biased, right? Because they depend on you, right? I'll just go ask the church group down. Again, they know you, right? We need some strangers, some non-lawyer people to ask and get information out of to build your case for the jury, right? We got to get out of our way and listen. So that's always the goal with our focus groups. And so I've made a little checklist for you. And don't worry, this is going to be in the show notes. If you are driving or working out or walking down the street, listening to this, these are going to be in the show notes. And I've divided it up into kind of a presentation / planning and then moderating. Now, I will say from one of the best things you can do is write everything out. Write out everything that you're going to say, write out all your questions. Now, I know you're thinking, gosh, that is so tedious. That's not how I do anything in my practice, Liz. I understand. But what we're doing in this focus group is so very specific. And it's just so easy to tee off, right, and reveal your bias if we don't really pay attention and be really aware of it. Now, as you keep doing them, it's going to be second nature to you. All right. So, okay, well, hold on. If I say it that way, that's actually going to reveal a bias, or that's actually giving a little pretext. Okay. So that's the best thing I can say is be able to write it out, leave it, come back, look at it, and be able to say, oh, that's a lot of legalese in there. But if we're just looking at our checklist and thinking about, so let's talk about our planning and our presentation checklist, right? So we're putting together a presentation and maybe you're going to write it all out. Maybe you're just going to do a really heavy outline. It's also a really great way to do it. And so here are 5 things on my checklist that I would say, hey, have this checklist out to look at your presentation. When you're thinking about planning your presentation or the case you're going to do, put this checklist there. And number 1 is remove legalese. There is always another way to say negligence, to say malpractice. There's always another way. We are in a focus group. We're not in a courtroom. Okay. So when you put in legalese, it's confusing to people. Some people won't even ask you what it means. They'll just make assumptions. Or what I see sometimes is we spend so much extra time explaining the legalese when we could have just used that language to begin with. Okay. So think about that legalese. Think about that plaintiff, defendant. They may not know what the word plaintiff is, but they do know the word defendant. So again, we're already charging things up a little bit for confrontation wise. So easy ways to remove those. Think of other ways to say it, right? So number one, remove legalese. Number two, you want to give context, not pretext. Okay, so let me give an example of this. Let's talk about a car wreck, because that's generally pretty easy. Generally, always all have one, but this works for almost any kind of case you may have. So context is, in a car wreck case, is the weather is clear, we are on Burnett and Jones Road. There's 2 lanes on Burnett, there's 4 lanes on Jones. At this intersection, there is a 3-light traffic signal. I'm just giving context. Pretext is, this is a presentation about a car crash. This is a presentation about a surgery gone wrong. Now, I've just gone I put you wherever your mind goes. I've gone ahead and planted you there, right? Versus giving context. So always be thinking about when we're putting together a presentation, am I already setting people on a direction by what I'm saying? Or do I just need to give context, right? And sometimes we give context to remove questions later down the road, but always be thinking about, am I doing one versus the other? Maybe I just need to give context. If you can't, you find that like, I don't know how to do that, Elizabeth, just line through that sentence altogether. Just don't say it, right? Just don't say it. Because if you can't think a way around it, then maybe you just don't need to say it. And what happens is, this is one tip I would say is, for me, when I am putting together a presentation or I'm thinking about, how do I say this? I love to create my outline and walk away from it, come back the next day and look at it, because what'll happen is I'll be like, oh, they're not going to know what bad faith is. Well, here's the other way to say this. So I love putting things down and coming back to them, even for a day, will help your brain be able to refresh and look at the checklist for the presentation. Number 3 is, the way to remain neutral is to have both sides. And it could be, this is the point of view of the red car. This is the point of view of the blue car. This is the point of view of the doctor. This is the point of view of the patient. Neutral language, that goes along with this in our checklist here, that we're using neutral language. We're not jazzing up our language. And if you're not sure what that means, right? This is when we say, crashed into versus, full force, flew right into the side of that car. Getting a little bit excited about that, right? Our 4th checklist is just going through and removing very language that's subtle. My case, removing those words altogether. Your logo. A lot of people have kind of a sample PowerPoint that always has their logo on it. Take that out of there. The caption. Some people always want to put the caption in their presentation. People don't know what that is. So it just starts off on a confusing, and it's also a little bit of pretext too. So just remove it. People don't know what it is. You're just basically starting off on a confusing point. And our last one would be thinking again about looking at our presentation, and if you've outlined it, if you created a PowerPoint, going back through and looking at it and saying, am I repeating myself? And lawyers are really notorious. If there's a point that they really, really love, they say it multiple times. Now, I understand if you're writing an opening statement, you're going to go in the courtroom, you're going to give a closing statement, you're going to want to repeat yourself. The rule of 3s. That's great. But we're in a focus group, so we don't need to do that. We really want to make sure that we're not repeating ourselves too many times on the same point. Okay, so that's our checklist for presentation. Let's talk about our moderating checklist. And again, we've got 5 things on this checklist. Number 1, most important, to make sure we are staying in our research mindset, is open-ended question. Who, what, when, where, how come? Those are easy questions, right? People can take them anywhere they want. And that's what we want. We just want to make sure we get on those, get what's in their brains. Number 2, ask everyone the big questions, right? So I typically have, here are 3 issues that we need to make sure and ask questions about. So I got to get everyone on that question. What can happen is sometimes we get stuck and we ask 1 or 2 people, and then we end up following up and we don't finish the round with everybody. Well, that's a very easy way to expose bias, is because you're only listening to people that you like and you're skipping everybody else. So that's a really easy one. Ask everyone the big questions before you follow up. That's right. Ask everyone the big question before you go back and follow up. Super easy to do, super easy to forget to do. Number 3, it's always tell me more, not why. Just write, tell me more. Just, write it on your sheet in front of you. Tell me more, right? Instead of why. And it's just a very easy, subtle thing. Use this in jury selection. Lots of people would agree with me, right? Tell me more. Number 4, This one, again, is huge for a research mindset is don't give more facts. Lawyers love to do this. They love it. Focus groups are always going to ask more questions, right? They're inquisitive people. They want to know more. We don't give them more. Why? Because you give them what you gave them. You want to get what they think about this information just as it lies. If it was important enough for you, you should have put it in the main one. But a lot of times what people want to do is they want to dribble facts out. Well, I want to see how this influences them. Well, no, that is influencing them. Let me withhold this fact and then tell you, right? Couple things happen. Number one, people start to realize you're withholding information, so they start to withhold their information. Oh, you've got more. Number two, people start to say, well, it depends. Well, it depends. You have more. It depends. Now, does it depends help you with any? No, that doesn't help you with your case at all. And then number three, people most of the time when they do it, everyone asks about speed. So the speed of the cars was 35. Why is that important to you? Now I've asked why, and now I've just implied that it's important to you. So it just gets us in a hairy mess. So if you're starting out, or even you've been doing them, this whole dribbling facts out, right, is not great. Even if you put it in a question. So what would you think if the police officer gave this car a ticket? Okay, so they already know. What else do you have? So if it's important, put it in the presentation. Also, if that comes into evidence, put it in the presentation. Okay, so anyhow, if you're just starting out or you've been maybe doing this for a little while and you're getting stumped in the discussion, that's a very, very good reason why the faucet turns off of information and you get this, well, it depends. Well, it depends. Or you just get people who just don't talk anymore. So that could be a big one. So put facts in your presentation and then hold your guns. Great. That's information you'd like to know. Okay, tell me how that would help you or not. So now I'm following up. I'm getting what you wanted. Some people say, oh, I just wanted to know, right? Versus you may think, oh, well, you don't know. So that's the follow-up to getting a question about, oh, well, I want to know if the doctor said this to the patient. Okay, well, tell me a little bit more about that. Or, tell me how is that fitting in? Again, I'm just trying to get more information about how. All right, last one, moderating. Mindset number 5 is don't pit your participants against one another. We talked about this earlier. Trying to pit people against one another takes a very, very skilled moderator to do that. And also just don't do it. If you want to pit people against one another, pit them against you, right? Play devil's advocate. Pit them against you and make them take the opposite side, right? I'm going to take the opposite side of what they think. So you want to pit somebody against another person, pit them against you as the moderator, right? Okay. This episode was a little bit longer, but I appreciate you guys hanging in there. And don't forget the checklist for presentation planning and for moderating to keep our research mindset will be in the show notes for you. Ultimately, y'all, the goal is always to get more information to build a better case for the jury. That is what we're doing here. We don't want to stifle getting that information in our focus groups. We work so hard to put them together, to get these people here. We take our time to present and create. We really want you to get that feedback and learn from your cases instead of getting that one-sided feedback. So that's what this episode was about. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please review on your favorite podcast platform. That way more people can find it, follow it, so you can download the new episodes when they come in. Also, just so that you know, please join the email list. That will also be a link in the show notes. There are other new things that I release, checklist downloads, even some new courses that are coming out about helping lawyers create their own focus groups, run focus groups better to learn more. So join that email list. The link is in the show notes. And until next time, thank you.